Hello. Uh, I may have to do this video in more than one part because I'll probably run out of memory on my phone, and it's kind of a long story. But I know for anybody watching, you're probably wondering what my deal is, why I'm living the way I am, and what I'm doing, and why I'm doing it, and so on. So I'm going to give you a synopsis. I'm going to tell you how I came to be where I'm at now, and I'm going to give you a rough idea of my plans for the future, even though that may change because circumstances may change, and I'm not really sure what I'll be able to do and what I won't be able to do. But I'll tell you what I hope to do. Basically, it's like this. When I was a young child, when I started school, until I started school, things were good. When I started school, though, I started to have problems. I didn't fit in with the other kids a lot of the time. I didn't really want to do the things they were doing. We used to be, and this was back in the early 70s, so we had a kind of almost like a pack mentality. And boys especially, we had to fight. I could fight. If I had to fight, I was good at it, but I didn't like it. And I didn't like to fight, but I would if I was backed into a corner and had no choice, I would. And oftentimes I'd win, too. I was a strong little guy, and I was tough. And I grew up with violence. In my family, there was a lot of domestic violence, and I'm not going to get into that too much because that's my parents. I don't want to dishonor my parents talking about those things. They had their reasons, especially my dad, especially was violent, but he had his reasons, and he had his own traumas and things he was dealing with, and so I'm not going to run the man into the ground. He died when I was 20 years old in 1988. And I just want to let him rest in peace. I miss my dad. And I've forgiven him. Anything he did against me, I've forgiven him for it. Not holding any grudges. Anyway, I stood out as different for that reason, and I was targeted. Then I got targeted by the psychiatric profession. They brought in the school psychologist. And of course, when they brought her in, she'd go to the classroom and let everybody know who she was and why she was there, who she was after. And so then, of course, I really got picked on. Now I was a crazy person. This is 1974. It wasn't a good thing. Not a label you'd want. Anyway, it ended up that I got sent to the Clark Institute of Psychiatry in Toronto. This was after a meeting with a psychologist in the city. I won't say where exactly, but I'm in Eastern Ontario. And the psychologist actually tried to convince my parents to put me on tranquilizers, which to their credit, they didn't do. The psychologist actually did a line of cocaine on his desk in front of me. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I know now. So that's the kind of screwed up situation I was dealing with back then. I ended up at the Clark Institute of Psychiatry in Toronto, where I was used as a guinea pig for medical experiments. They run all kinds of drugs through my system: haloperidol, Pimozide. They even gave me LSD, and they made films of me while I was high on LSD and stuff. It was quite a thing anyway, and that was in 1976 when I was 8 years old. And I came out of there in bad shape. I had lost the ability to speak. I didn't know when I needed to use the bathroom anymore, and there was no help for me. I had to learn all this stuff all over again on my own. I taught myself how to speak. You may notice that I have a speech impediment. I have a bit of a stutter, and I also have trouble pronouncing certain words. That's partially because I had the mumps when I was 5, and I suffer from partial hearing loss from that, and also because of basically as an 8-year-old boy teaching myself how to speak again. But I managed to do it. I managed to learn to recognize when I needed to use the toilet too, but I did all these things while being ridiculed and beaten, and it wasn't nice anyway. I lost my strength. I was passing out. And I've had problems health-wise ever since then, anyway. I was in that hospital in Toronto for 56 days, and it really did change my life, and it really didn't change it for the better. But I do believe everything happens for a reason. This isn't a complaining video. This isn't a looking for sympathy video. There are people who have had far bigger problems than I've had. And so that's not why I'm doing this. I just want to let you all know why I'm living the way I'm living and how I came to live this way. Anyway, I ended up on my own at 15 because things weren't good at home. And I went to work in a factory, went to work in a wire factory, worked 4 to midnight shift, and I went to school in the daytime. I got my high school. I was sleep deprived and sick and everything, but I did it, and actually those were some of the best days of my life. And I boarded at different places, and I know a lot of really good people helped me. And my co-workers in the wire factory were really good to me. My foreman, this is one of the few names I'm going to say on this video, but my foreman was a man by the name of Jack Radford. Jack Radford, he was a good friend to me anyway. He's long gone now, he's long dead now, and I'm sorry I'm starting to break up a little bit, but it meant an awful lot to me that he was as good to me as he was. So I hope you don't think too badly of me for sometimes getting emotional. I do get that way when I talk about certain people. But anyway, he was really good to me. And there were a lot of people who were. And I can't tell you how much I've appreciated that over the years, you know. A lot of people really helped me out in a lot of ways when I was young. And I won't say it was easy, and I won't say I didn't have people that hurt me, because I did. But generally speaking, you know, I had a lot of really good people in my life who helped me. I may run out of video very soon. I may have to start another one soon. So just to let you know, looks like I'm going to run out of film shortly here. But anyway, I did that. Got my high school diploma, graduated in 1987. Of course, my health was bad. I had different jobs after that. I got laid off from the wire factory in 87 because that's when the economy started to tank. You know, that's when the boom of the mid-80s came to an end. And I got laid off. Anyway, I had different jobs and wasn't able to keep a job for very long, partially because of the economy and partially because of my health. Worked in a shoe warehouse, drove a truck, did that for a while. Drove a taxi cab, that was interesting. Had a lot of interesting experiences driving a taxi cab, good and bad. And so on. Anyway, I ended up, my health went really bad. When I was driving a taxi cab, I got badly run down and I nearly died. I ended up with the pneumonia. The doctors were refusing to treat me, and they weren't acknowledging that I had the pneumonia. I eventually found the doctor who did treat me with heavy antibiotics, because by that time it was really bad. A good doctor, he's passed on now too, actually, from a brain tumor. Died a young man. Really good doctor, though. And again, I appreciate anybody who was good to me, you know. But it ended up that I went through all that. That's why my lungs are scarred, and that's why I have asthma now. But I ended up, I had to go on a disability pension at that time. Disability don't pay very much, and so I started to do scrap metal. I had people saving scrap metal for me. I'd walk the ditches and pick scrap metal out of the ditches. There's my other phone. Aluminum cans and things like that. And I'd sell all that for scrap. And I did all right at it, too. That was getting into the 90s and stuff, and at that time scrap prices were pretty good. And it was a good supplement to my income. And I was doing all right anyway. I wasn't rich by any stretch of the imagination, but back then you could drive for cheap. I always had some old car, an old Chev Caprice or Pontiac Parisienne or something like that, you know. And I'd use those cars like a workhorse. I just worked them to death, you know, and at that time they were cheap and disposable, and you'd buy a car for $300, drive it for two years or 5 years or whatever. Then if something big would go on it, and you'd just get another one. And that's what I did anyway, and moved a lot of scrap metal and a lot of beat up old cars. Made some money doing it too, and it worked out pretty well anyway. And with that, I could work when I was able to, and if I had a day where wasn't healthy enough to work, I didn't have to. So it worked out. It's not like I had a boss who was counting on me to be there during certain hours. I could work when I was able to. Anyway, I had a really bad landlord. And just getting up into the 2000s now, I had a really bad landlord. I'd lived in the same place since 1988. Moved in there when I was 20, shortly after my dad died. And the landlord had always been horrible. And it seemed like the longer I was there, the more contempt he had for me. And, you know, the more I got sick of dealing with him and putting up with the things he was doing. And so I started to fight back against him, and that caused a lot of problems between myself and this landlord anyway. And I knew the writing was on the wall. I needed to get out of where I was. So I started building my credit. I never had a credit card or anything before. I got a credit card, and I got a line of credit. Started building my credit, saving my money. And I just was so sick of landlords, I decided, because of this landlord, he turned me off on landlords so bad, I decided I'd buy a house. And in the early 2000s in this area, because this is a depressed area, I'm in Eastern Ontario, I could buy a house for $60,000, even less in some cases. So that's what I decided I was going to do. That was my goal. Well, I started going to auctions, and I started buying up scrap metal at auctions. And then I really started making money. You know, I made really good money doing that. There were times when I'd buy up all the scrap metal and maybe pay $2 for a big load of scrap metal, spend a couple of weeks sorting it all and cleaning it all, sell it, and make $1,000. There was nothing to do that back then, you know. And so I was doing pretty well anyway. I really was, and life was good. Anyway, I went to this one auction. It was a real estate auction, and I actually knew the auctioneer. And I had known the auctioneer's ex-wife because she drove a cab with us. We didn't let the ladies drive at night or anything, but we had a couple of ladies that drove, but they drove in the afternoons and stuff like that when it was safer. You know, back in 1990, you know, men were, I think, more like that. We were kind of protective of women, and we didn't want these ladies driving at night when they were, you know, because it'd get pretty bad sometimes. It'd get scary. Even in the daytime, it could get scary, though. She had an incident where a customer was going crazy in the car with a knife. And she put the call out anyway. She needed help. And I was the first one there. And I scared the hell out of the guy. I come racing up behind her in my car. I drove an 1984 Buick LeSabre Limited sedan. Great big old car. I came up behind her, just roared right up behind her on that, and threw the car into park, and was out of the car with the big club that we all carried a club in the car for protection. And I slammed the club down on the trunk lid of her car. She was driving an 81 Chev Impala sedan at the time, and just roared. And that guy, my plan was, because I was scared, you know, I didn't want to go up against a guy with a knife on my own. But my plan was just to basically do a shock and awe type thing. Scare the guy half to death, make him think that I was just a maniac. Even crazier than he was. Basically out-crazy the crazy guy so he'd leave without having to fight him. And that did work. The door flung open and that guy ran. Yeah, he couldn't get out of there fast enough. So I guess I can say I out-crazy the crazy person. If that's something to be proud of, I don't know. But, the auctioneer, anyway, at this real estate auction, he remembered me, and he was kind of grateful to me because he knew I had helped his wife out years back, got her out of a sticky situation. And so we became friends, and I eventually ended up working for him. And again, it was pretty good, you know, and making good money. I enjoyed the work. I found loading the trucks hard and stuff because of my health being the way it is. There were times that I'd have to lean against a wall or something, you know, inside the truck and just get my breath. And I was taking pains in my heart and so on. But I'd recover enough that I'd be able just to go through and continue, and you know, they didn't know how bad it really was for quite a while. Eventually they figured it out, though. That was kind of the beginning of the end of that job, but still I did have other jobs I did for them, so I wasn't completely out of work. But I started going to the auctions, his auctions, and buying scrap metal from him too and stuff, and like I say, it worked out pretty well. Anyway, I'm going to stop this here because I know I'm going to run out of space. I'll load this up onto YouTube, and then I'll continue the story from the point where I was working for this auctioneer. I'm not going to say too many names on this because I'm not out to dox anybody. I'm not out to hurt anybody. I'm not out to hurt anybody's business or anything like that. Unless somebody was particularly good to me, I'm not going to say their name. But people who know me personally will know. They'll know anyway, you know. And I actually forgot part of the story. I'll go back and tell you part of the story that I forgot in the next video. Talk to you in a little while.